Mr. Hassel, would you like to make a note?
I would, thank you, Judge. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no question that Sergeant Hassel's death is not just sad, but is a tragedy. Anytime anyone dies, I think we all agree, it is sad. Okay? Even when there's someone you didn't particularly like, you find yourself maybe not talking bad about them afterwards after they've died because, you know, there's a certain reverence we give to people who died. It's sad. You don't want to badmouth someone who's not around anymore. And there's no question that it is particularly sad, it is tragic, when a young man who, by all accounts, had decades of life left to live, who was a husband and a father, when he doesn't just die, but he's murdered. That is exceedingly tragic. But as sad as that is, ladies and gentlemen, as good a guy as I'm sure Sergeant Hassel was, I'm sure he was great with his family, I'm sure he was a good father to his son, as giving and as loving as a man as he may or may not have been, that doesn't make Kemia Hassel any more or less guilty of being involved in his death. Hearing all the things about his rise through the military, as impressive as I'm sure it was, and as bad as we feel for his family, and I'm not immune to that, I'm human too, as bad as we feel for his family, that doesn't make Kemia Hassel more responsible. It makes us angry. It makes us frustrated that things like this happen. But our job, and your job in particular, is not to take out that anger and frustration and sadness and empathy, to take all those feelings, roll them up, and blame Kemia Hassel for his death. Because that would be a tragedy too, ladies and gentlemen. Think about it. Think about, forget me being a lawyer. Think about this. Convicting someone who's not responsible of murder. That is a tragedy too. Saying to someone who's not responsible for someone else's death, you're responsible, and you will be dealt with accordingly, that is tragic too. And my hope is that all of us together can avoid that second tragedy. And the way that we do so, ladies and gentlemen, the way that we do in this case, the way that we do in any criminal case, is we take a look at the evidence that we have. Now, I am a little surprised to hear Mr. Perangeli talk about Ms. Hassel as sort of the mastermind behind this, because I think there's no question in my mind, and I think Mr. Perangeli and I agree on this at least, that Jeremy Cuellar is directly, no question about it, responsible for Tyrone Hassel's death. There's no question about it, no doubt, reasonable or otherwise. One of the things that you will see, I believe, is you'll see evidence of, as Mr. Perangeli said, a trail of his cell phone driving up from Georgia to Chicago. And then you're going to see him coming over to Berrien County. There's no question that he's here at the time of the shooting. He is clearly involved in this. He's clearly responsible for this. But just because he's responsible does not mean Kemia Hassel's involved. Among the many things I'm not is a licensed therapist, a medical doctor, I don't have a PhD. But I feel confident in telling you that I think the evidence will clearly establish that Jeremy Cuellar is a full-blown psychopath. Forget the fact that he planned to murder someone. I think that alone can put you in a special category. But what he does, ladies and gentlemen, is Specialist Hamilton, he's going to come up here and he's going to tell you, Jeremy Cuellar told him, straight up told him in June of last year, I'm going to do this. I am going to kill this guy. And I'm going to do so because I want to be with Kemia. He never hears anything about this from Kemia. In fact, Specialist Hamilton isn't even sure that there's anything going on between Miss Hassel, between Kemia and Mr. Cuellar. They're on a base together for months and months. And he can't even really say if anything's going on between them in the first place. No. This is Mr. Cuellar's plan. This is his idea. And he sits there and he tells Specialist Hamilton about it. And Specialist Hamilton, for whatever reason, he doesn't tell anybody about this. He doesn't appear to tell his superiors about this. as far as I can tell, he doesn't even tell Kemia about this. He just says, okay, man, that's great, you have your plan, and he goes on his merry way. It's not until after Sergeant Hassel's murder that Jeremy Cuellar, again, after he has apparently committed this murder, he comes back and he says to Specialist Hamilton, he says, hey, I got him. I did it. He's out of the way, whatever verbiage he uses. So not only does Jeremy Cuellar come up with this plan, he tells someone about it beforehand, but he tells someone about it afterwards. It takes a special kind of mindset to do that, ladies and gentlemen. Not a careless one, not a stupid one, not, oh wow, this guy was sloppy. It takes a special kind of mental status to do that. And Jeremy Cuellar is obviously so concerning to people, and particularly Specialist Hamilton, that I believe the evidence will show you that Specialist Hamilton sort of holed up because he was afraid of Jeremy Cuellar. When he finally told CID, the Naval or the Army Criminal Investigative, their bureau, he tells them what's happened, and he's afraid of this guy. And I would be too. If someone told me I'm going to go murder somebody, and then they come back and you find out this person's been murdered, and they say, yeah, I murdered them, I would probably be scared too. So not only do we have a witness who will tell you, A, this guy told me this, and I'm going to go ahead and presume that he didn't really think he was going to do it. I'd like to think, and we'll have a chance to ask him, if he really did, he would have told somebody. But then afterward, when it's done, he's so afraid of this guy that he, these people are all in the Army. They're not just regular people like you and me. They have training, they have facilities around them to protect them, and even he's afraid of this guy. That's the person, ladies and gentlemen, who's responsible for this. In his own words, he made these statements on his own, before there was any murder, after the murder there was no investigation. He's bragging about it because he's so happy he gets to be with Kemia. He's the person who's responsible. And the only evidence, ladies and gentlemen, the only real evidence that the government has against Kemia is this statement that you heard very well-placed clips from. And what you're also going to hear, though, ladies and gentlemen, is how Kemia Hassel was interrogated first, I believe, in Berrien County. Then I believe they took her from Berrien County to Lansing. She was interviewed, a part you're not going to hear, for about an hour, hour and a half before this statement was made, denying the entire time that she had anything to do with this. Every time she was asked, she said, I don't have anything to do with it. Yes, I know Jeremy Cuellar. Yes, we were in the Army together. No, we weren't in a relationship together. She was consistent all of these times, over all of this time, that she had nothing to do with it. But then, Detective Monguski, he sits down, and he kind of breaks her down, ladies and gentlemen, and you see him, he sort of pulls up next to her, and he gets right in her face, and he says, Kemia, I get it. I think you're a good person. I know you would never really be involved in this. I'm willing to co-sign. I'm willing to co-sign your loan that says you're a good person, that you really wouldn't be involved in this. And Jeremy's in custody, and he's starting to talk, which he wasn't, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Jeremy Cuellar gave no statement whatsoever. But that's not what the lieutenant or the detective told Kemia. He said, Jeremy's going to talk. And you got to get out in front of this. You've got to get out in front of this. He says that 8 to 10 times. You've got to get out in front of this. And I believe in you, and I'm willing to co-sign the loan that says you're a good person. And I want you to think about Chunk, ladies and gentlemen. And I would tell you that the same reason that the prosecutor kept calling Tyrone Hassel IV Chunk is the same reason the detective kept calling him Chunk to Kemia. To push those buttons. To make her emotional. You have to think about Chunk. I believe in you, and you have to tell me what happened because he's going to start talking, and he's throwing you under the bus. And you got to get out in front of this because you have a future with Chunk. I don't know what future she's going to have with Chunk after she's confessed to murder. But he says, you have a future with Chunk. And you got to get out in front of this. And it's only at that time, ladies and gentlemen, only after this detective has falsely said that Jeremy Cuellar is about to throw her under the bus. He talks about, you've got to think about Chunk, you've got to think about your child, this young mother. He tells her, you've got to get out in front of this, you've got to think about your future. It's only then, after all those buttons have been pushed, that that statement comes out. It's only then, after she's been poked and prodded, not literally, but after those buttons have been pushed, when he talks about, think about the best interests of your children, think about your future. Again, I don't know what future this is. But it's only at that point, after hours and hours of denying, that Kemia Hassel makes this statement. And that's important, ladies and gentlemen, because the essence of this case is that statement. Mr. Perangeli has somewhere in the neighborhood of 27 witnesses that potentially could be called. Many of them I will have no questions for, because none of them can give you any evidence to implicate Kemia Hassel. Many of them are what are called fact witnesses. For example, there's a medic who's going to testify, I believe, today, and he's going to tell you, I got to the scene, I responded, obviously I saw Mr. Hassel, we tried to render aid. I will have no questions for this person, because nothing he says can implicate Ms. Hassel. There will be officers who responded to the scene. None of them will implicate Ms. Hassel. I will have no questions for them. And the reason, ladies and gentlemen, when you see me not ask any questions, it's because that person has not shed any light as to whether or not Kemia Hassel is involved in Tyrone Hassel's death. The actual amount of evidence the police have, not that a murder took place, that Kemia Hassel was involved is very minimal. I hope that you listen to that evidence, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope that we can avoid another tragedy in finding the wrong person responsible for Tyrone Hassel's death. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you.